welcome back to the 2TAKES podcast with, you guessed it, April and Shannon. Today's topic that we are going to be exploring from two perspectives is acceptance may involve grief. So we're going to explore that topic, and April is going to go first this week.
I'm going to kick it off. I will first say that acceptance doesn't always involve grief. Lots of times things just happen and we accept them and move on. But that if you're at all familiar with the grief cycle, acceptance is the last stage of that. So I'll flip this and say that grief involves acceptance. For those who aren't familiar with the stages of grief, it's typically denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then finally acceptance. Something that I have talked about, I think once before on this podcast, which is really personal to me, is that last year, my husband was just randomly laid off from his job. And it turned out that the whole department wound up being done away with. He wasn't told that at the time. He had no clue why. But aside from having lost a loved one, that is the most intense cycle of grief that I have ever actually witnessed. And I did witness all of it. And it came from both of us. I mean, we both went through denial. This cannot be happening. How is this happening? And then we went to anger. Like, what did I do to deserve this? What did everything right? I worked 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. We worked on the weekends, did this, did that, gave 120% every single day. And this is the outcome. Why? To bargaining, I don't think that there was ever maybe they'll take me back, but I can certainly see that happening. What can I do to make this go away? What can I do to make this better? Can I do this? Can I do that? Can I X, Y, or Z?
Or what should I have done?
Right. To just full on depression over the situation. And let me tell you, as two middle-aged adults with two kids in college, having 2/3 of our family income just stripped away and getting to go through the glorious process of figuring out unemployment it sucked. I mean, there's no other word for it. Anyone who's been there and done it, I don't think that there's a better descriptor for it than that. But in all honesty, it sucked. It was horrible. And there was a lot of depression that went along with that as we were literally parsing out our finances and figuring out, hey, I guess we'll get rid of this. 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 We can do this. It's just, we're giving up. Not that we had a lavish lifestyle to begin with, but we're giving up a good chunk of our lifestyle to survive. And then you live with it for a bit, you get into the swing of things, you realize that A, it could be a lot worse. B, it's okay. And C, eventually, slowly, things get better. And when I say slowly, for us, it was only a couple of months. For other people, it's a couple of days. For other people, it's a couple of years. So it's not a set path, but acceptance is a huge part of grief. And I think that that's something that we often look over, be it in our personal lives or our professional lives, is that you may have somebody around you who is grieving something and you can't force them into the acceptance stage, but you can walk alongside them and help them get to the acceptance stage, if that makes sense at all. And just that it does come, but it's not necessarily a linear progression. Anger may come before denial. You may bounce back and forth between depression and bargaining quite a bit. But acceptance does eventually come. And I think the other kind of caveat to that is that it does leave scars. And I think that's something to be cognizant of also in the workforce. If you're bringing new people in, you don't know what their past has been like. You don't know what their past work life has been like, or schooling, or how they grew up, or anything like that. And they may be carrying things around that they went through the grief cycle on, they've accepted, they've moved on, but those scars are still there. And being cognizant of that, and knowing that, just knowing that people are people, and that's the way of the world, I guess.
Well, I will say before I take my take, just for you guys that are concerned, maybe watch our podcast, is the end of that tale is that there has been gainful employment in a place that is very fulfilling and exciting. And in that moment of any of those grief stages, even before acceptance or maybe during acceptance, that this really did happen, you didn't see the end of the process and the moment. You have to trust that it will have an ending that is yet to show itself. And so just so you know, lots of good things happened after that moment. So yay.
Yes. And if you ask my husband, he will say readily that he does have scars from it. He will also say that in it, looking back on things, that it was the best thing that could have happened, just because he was in a not great environment and was able to transition to a really great environment. And he went into the not great environment not knowing that it wasn't not so great, and really trying to fight against that and make it better and make it better and make it better. And, you know, having it not work out in the end, I think made it all the more painful. But it did get him to where he is today, which is not a place that he thought he would be necessarily, but he's there. And you can't get onto the next step of whatever the process is, wherever you're at in life, until that acceptance happens. So knowing that it's okay to grieve something, even if it's not, grief happens in all circumstances. Can be something as mundane as, I can't even think of something right now. I
have an example I'm going to bring to the table.
Okay, well, Shannon's got an example to bring to the table. So let's go with Shannon.
Perfect. Well, April, thank you for sharing that. I know sometimes sharing something so personal can be difficult, but I think it's so helpful as we face different things that bring us to a moment of acceptance. And I think about this, I thought, what do I want to talk about from my perspective? One is I've learned in my personal life that sometimes my acceptance of what reality is now is just not what I expected it to be. And I just need to accept it for what it is. And I need to be okay with that. But sometimes that disappointment, we have a related podcast that you can look up on this about expectations, but some of that is just grieving and saying goodbye to what you thought it was going to be. So part of that process for me was identifying that the emotion that I was really feeling was either grief or akin to grief. I could easily say, well, I'm just really disappointed, or I'm really blindsided, or I'm really surprised. And I would have all of those terminology, but it wasn't until someone said to me and goes, yeah, but your response to this is so much more strong than what those emotions bring. I really feel like you're experiencing grief in this moment. And whether that's related to the level of expectation or the level of surprise, I don't know. I am not a counselor or a psychologist, but it did make sense to me that sometimes that acceptance to move forward is grieving what I thought it could be or should be. And so I thought about that, relating it back into our work life, and maybe not something as traumatic as losing a job or having something unexpected in that realm, but we do go through things that bring the unexpected. And so think about if you're in sales and you lose a key deal, think of the stages of grief as you go through that. You might get the call, hey, we're not moving forward with you. They didn't mean that. That didn't happen. You could go into denial. You didn't see that coming. And you might be kind of angry. Why so stupid to go with someone else? You could get really angry about it. You could get angry at your sales staff that didn't make the deal happen. Maybe you go to bargaining going, what if we lower our prices? Do you think they'll buy then? What are we going to bargain? What are we depressed? What am I going to do now? That was going to make my quarter sales. That was going to get me the bonus that was going to pay for my family vacation. Or what if I don't make my quarterly sales? What happens to my job? You could go in depression over that. And then honestly, the quicker, not to rush all the stages, but the quicker in those regards that we could get to acceptance, accepting that happened to move forward, is that purchase decision wasn't in the cards right now. Okay. Lay it aside, because the more we get caught up in that being the non-reality, the more time we waste getting to the yes as far as sales goes. I also think about this, say you're not in sales and a key employee, like your star employee, has given notice. I hate that. It's happened to everybody that has a team. It's like, what? Seriously? I thought they were happy. I don't know. What could I have done different? We go through all these denials. I'm really angry at them. I feel like they should have told me earlier. Well, maybe they didn't know earlier, maybe there was nothing for you to fix, and it was just time for them to do something different because their circumstance had changed. But bargaining, what could I do to get you to stay? Usually that never works well. The decision's already been made. Going home that night going, I just can't believe this happened. I'm so depressed. Our whole future landed on one person. That is never the case. But at that moment, sometimes you feel that way. And accepting that this happened, what I have learned going through this a few times now is that change brings the perfect person in time that the organization needed to go to the next level, typically. But I didn't trust that or accept that in the moment until I had enough history behind me to go, that sucked, but it got better. Or that person was needed at that stage in my business, and I didn't realize what could be with someone new and new ideas, new approaches, new energies. So thinking about that, identifying really what the emotion that you're having is to the circumstance in front of you, trying to, especially in things that aren't grief, like heavy grief, you're bidding adieu to a loved one or something like that, is identifying how you're feeling and get through that faster so you can move forward faster is my key to bringing this up. Sometimes acceptance involves grief of what you thought it was going to be, and being okay with saying goodbye to that. So hopefully that helps you out in your work life, going, hey, we're going to accept this and move on and get that momentum going, because we are forward thinking here at the 2TAKES podcast. Let me know how you're going to envelop this thought into your work life, your personal life, to make you better and more agile as you face circumstances that aren't chosen by you sometimes. We'll see you next week on the 2TAKES podcast. Take care.